But what was interesting about what you want to do is that anything that looks like it might be a conflict of interest would be, according to what you're working on here, a high crime and misdemeanor under the impeachment clause of the U.S. Constitution. Do you think that's a bit presumptuous, sir? I mean, he hasn't even taken office, and you're already saying that anything that even hints of a conflict is grounds for maybe getting impeachment stuff going.
Well, there's several issues here. First, the Constitution of the United States is very clear that any person who holds an office of trust, including the President of the United States, cannot accept any foreign gratuities or gifts. Mr. Trump's holdings are in many, many foreign countries. It would be impossible to determine whether a foreign government is not trying to curry favor with the President of the United States by giving special treatment to one of his business enterprises. Therefore, when he takes the oath of office on January the 20th, we don't want him in violation of our Constitution. That's why a resolution that I filed says that he needs to divest himself to comply with the Constitution of the United States. The most recent concerns have been expressed generally on conflict.
And lawyers have backed on the idea that, given the unique nature of his wealth, the oddity is that cabinet members are more beholden to that than are presidents. Is that true?
No, that's not true. The Constitution applies equally to all. Every president since George Washington has taken important steps to divorce themselves from their
But we've not had a guy like this, right?
Conflict.
I mean, he has a multi-billion-dollar empire the world over, largely in real estate. But how would you have him separate that? A blind trust handed over to his kids wouldn't be good enough, right?
Well, I'm certainly going to agree with you that Mr. Trump is truly unique. I think that is absolutely correct. But his business holdings need to be put in a blind trust or divested so that he does not have a violation of the Constitution or a conflict that questions whether he's acting on America's best interest or its commercial best interest.
But how would you know that with real estate? But how would you know that with real estate? Because when, in the days of John F. Kennedy, of course, his father had ample real estate holdings around the world, and the father was taking care of that and said, this wealth is from me, it's not Jack. So there was kind of an understanding that the president was apart from that because this was the wealth of his father, and again, largely in real estate. So what's different now versus then?
President Kennedy took steps to divorce himself from all of his business holdings, all of his personal wealth. That was
but all his personal wealth was his father's wealth, and the dad and he talked quite a bit, obviously.
Well, I think it's a very valid point. You can't control every member of your family.
Right.
But if that member of the family has direct contact as an advisor to the president, then that is unacceptable.
But where do you draw the line, right,
cases,
Senator?
Mr.
I guess here what I want to know is the Obamas bucked this trend when they got in, and I'm not questioning his ethics at all, but they didn't use blind trust because they didn't have anything near the amount of money any of those individuals you raised, particularly Donald Trump. But they did have bank accounts and treasury notes. And if you think about it, treasuries were pristine investments for a time and a period where the Federal Reserve was keeping rates very low. So you could make the argument that that looked like a conflict of interest or something from which he was personally benefiting when the Fed led bond prices so high and yields so low, right?
Well, President Obama did both. He divested himself of his corporate holdings and invested in government treasuries. And then he also set up a blind trust.
Treasury notes. He didn't divest himself of index funds. College says he was by no means, you're quite right, a gazillionaire. But you could make the argument that the appearance of holding treasuries at a time the Federal Reserve is benefiting your recovery efforts would look like you are personally benefiting from that policy.
I was completing, he also set up blind trusts so that he didn't control his wealth at all during his presidency. And that's what presidents have done since the beginning of George Washington.
I understand, sir, but you see how in the eyes of the beholder, or you see how it's a slippery slope.
I don't mind. There's a big difference between rooting for our country with treasury bonds and holding a corporate interest in Russia in which you're can get favors on Trump enterprises. That's a huge difference.
Well, would you have been as vigilant then, Senator, if Hillary Clinton had become president and separating herself from her husband's foundation, maybe shutting that foundation down? You would have been just as aggressive. You would have been doing this. You would have been doing this right now.
I would have been insisting whoever holds the office of president, whoever that person is, they have to comply with the Constitution of the United States. They need to avoid conflicts. They need to set up arrangements where they either divest themselves of potential conflicts or put it into a blind trust.
So you would look at Hillary Clinton. She became president. Her husband still had the Clinton Foundation, that she divorced herself from that, not him, but divorced herself from that foundation, shut it down. Don't pass it on to a child where there might be the same nepotism, but shut it down. You would have aggressively called for that.
There's a big difference between owning a personal asset and being involved in a foundation. Having said that,
I don't know about that. That's hundreds of millions of dollars in that foundation, right?
There's also a big difference between a member of your family and their potential conflicts and a member of your family is going to be part of the inner circle of your advisory team. All of that are different circumstances.
I don't know. It just seems like grades of gray here to me, Senator. I mean, there it would have been the couple's daughter, Chelsea, presumably taking over this enterprise. Now, we'll never know. We'll never know. But I'm just saying, do you understand, is it that black and white? I mean, you're telling a guy whose wealth is largely tied up in real estate around the world to divest himself of that completely to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, right?
One thing which is clearly black and white is the Constitution of the United States. And in the Constitution of the United States, you cannot accept favors from foreign governments.
No, you're saying just the appearance of that. No, you're going a little further. If I'm reading this correct, Senator.
That's a constitutional provision.
No. Your legislation reads just the conflict of interest alone is a high crime and misdemeanor to warrant, if I'm reading it correctly, you educate me, to start impeachment proceedings.
We don't want, there's two issues here. One is the emoluments clause of the Constitution, which applies to all public officials, that Congress can't change. This is a law of the land. That deals with foreign gifts. Trump Enterprises deals globally. The second is that Americans want to make sure that the President of the United States is going to do what's in their best interest when he negotiates trade deals or when he sends our soldiers into harm's way and not his own commercial interests.
But you don't even need proof. If I'm reading this correctly, Senator, but if I'm reading this correctly, you don't even need proof. I mean, normally you have to see a quid pro quo. You have operations in Macau, let's say, and all of a sudden you're profiting off those operations, or there are deals that you're getting as a result of relations with Macau or China, what have you. That alone, just the appearance of that, would seem to warrant impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump in your legislation. I don't know if you want that.
We don't want impeachment. We don't want impeachment. We don't want a constitutional crisis.
Well, you keep mentioning impeachment.
No,
you keep high crimes and misdemeanors.
We want this done before January the 20th. The Constitution's already there. We can't change the Constitution.
So where is he going to take all of this real estate? You can't put real estate like the world over. You just can't throw that into a blind trust. It's very different than those who've come before him because of his wealth, I think, as you'll point out. So what is he supposed to do?
But that's the Constitution. He's got to comply with the Constitution of the United States. This is not something we can say, well, maybe, maybe not. The Constitution's there for a given reason.
And what does it say to do with it? What does it say to do with a real estate empire the world over? Just sell it en masse?
Either sell it or put it in a blind trust. That's been the practice of every president since George Washington.
But trusts have never dealt with multi-trillion-dollar swaths of real estate, right?
Look, the Constitution has served us well. There's a reason why we don't want foreign governments inappropriately influencing our elected public officials. Donald Trump needs to comply with the Constitution.